open.
So good evening, everyone. We have gone live on Facebook. This is Healthcare at Home Facebook and the DIBE page. We have our 13th webinar today when we start with the second week of the lockdown 3. This webinar is basically on teleconsultation and telehealth. And it's the first webinar which is in association with a national body. It is an association with the Telemedicine Association of India. So when we talk of telehealth, things changed overnight. जहां पे डॉक्टर ये बोलते थे कि हाथ लगाए बगैर हम कैसे प्रिस्क्रिप्शन लिख देंगे, मुझे तो पेशेंट को सामने देखना है, वहां से ओवरनाइट गवर्नमेंट ने भी गाइडलाइंस चेंज कर दी and the whole industry of telehealth multiplied by 3 to 5 times. इस सारे चक्कर में what is on patient privacy? जब एक पेशेंट एक डॉक्टर से टेलीकंसल्टेशन कर रहा है तो उसकी जो सारी इंफॉर्मेशन है उसका क्या हो रहा है, पेशेंट कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी का क्या हो रहा है, डॉक्टर की मेडिको लीगल लायबिलिटी पे क्या हो रहा है, डॉक्टर टेली हेल्थ की जो नई गाइडलाइंस आई हैं वो क्या कहती हैं कि प्रिस्क्रिप्शन को स्टोर कैसे करना है, कॉल के बारे में क्या करना है, अगर कोर्ट ऑफ लॉ में दोबारा जरूरत पड़े तो उसे रिट्रीव कैसे करना है, और इस सब में डॉक्टर की लायबिलिटी कितनी है, इन सब पे आज डिस्कशन करेंगे विद आवर स्टार स्टडीड पैनल. लेट मी इंट्रोड्यूस आवर सीनियर मोस्ट कर्नल अश्विनी गोयल. कर्नल अश्विनी गोयल is the founder member of Telemedicine Society of India and is currently the president-elect of Telemedicine Society of India. He is also the convener of TSI NCR chapter. He is an MBBS from AFMC Pune and has had an illustrious career in Arms Medical Corps. With 30 years of experience in medical informatics and healthcare management, he holds an MPhil in Hospital and Health System Management from BITS Pilani, MBA in Healthcare Administration from FMS Delhi, Diploma in Project Management, Diploma in Network Administration, Cyber Security, and Higher Diploma in Software Engineering, also Diploma in Computer Science. So we have a deadly combination of medicine and engineering here. He is also a member of International Society for Telemedicine and E-Health. He is also a member of Academy of Hospital Administration, External Senior Consultant and Assessor for Quality Assurance, Improvement of Healthcare Establishments for NHSRC, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Visiting Faculty and External Examiner, BSc and MSc Medical Informatics for Mahatma Gandhi University of Medical Science and Technology, Jaipur. He is a member of a number of committees for development of e-health and telehealth activities in India with Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and FICCI. Member National Task Force on Telemedicine Network Grid, National E-Health Authority, Indian Health Informatics Network constituted by Ministry of Health and Ministry of IT, and Health Informatics Sectional Committee for BIS Standards. He's been pioneering in conceptualization of raising of project management of organization into information systems for comprehensive automation of armed forces medical services. He has been instrumental in the release of the latest telehealth guidelines by Niti Aayog and is also a member of Technical Committee for Accreditation of Telehealth Standards by Quality Acquisition Institute of India. I welcome you, sir. It's an honor to have you on the panel today. So, after Dr. Goyal from the capital, I also have another star doctor from the National Capital Region. I welcome Dr. Sandeep Diwan. Dr. Sandeep Diwan is the Director and Head of Intensive Care and Critical Care Medicine at Fortis Memorial Research Institute, Gurugram, Haryana. After doing his graduation and post-graduation from the reputed PGIMS Rohtak, he has worked with institutes like Gangaram, Fortis VK, Escort Heart Institute, visiting faculty to SDT Medical College, Gurugram. He also has a DNP in anesthesiology and has done his Indian Diploma in Critical Care Medicine. His professional memberships are with member Indian Society of Anesthesia, life member Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine, executive member of Delhi SSCM. But what I know him is for very, very special interest in extracorporeal membrane oxygenation and its benefit in critical care. He has been a pioneer in running the ECMO programs in North India, running courses for it, and for getting the first accredited ECMO program in Asia. He has a passion for teaching ICU nurses, residents, consultants, and is known for his interest in e-learning. But why I have him today here is because of his love for remote monitoring and e-ICUs, which he has been practicing for last more than 10 years, and where he has been managing patients in tier 2 cities where you don't have a full-time intensivist, and also managing all the ICU patients who need critical care in home ICUs with healthcare at home. He also has to his credit more than 20 national and international papers and more than 200 presentations. I welcome you, Dr. Diwan.
Thank you, Dr. Gaurav. Thanks for such a elaborate introduction.
रोज मौका नहीं मिलता. From Bangalore, South India, I have another very dear friend, Dr. Pradeep Rangappa. Dr. Pradeep Rangappa is the head of intensive care program at Columbia Asia Hospitals. He is a DNP in internal medicine and holds a fellowship of the Joint Faculty of Intensive Care Medicine of the Australian and New Zealand College of Anesthesia. He also holds a European Diploma in Intensive Care Medicine, Fellow of College of Intensive Care Medicine, Postgraduate Diploma in Perioperative and Critical Care Echocardiography, Fellow of Indian College of Critical Care Medicine, and also is a postgraduate diploma in medical law and ethics from National Law University, Bangalore. He also holds an MBA in healthcare systems. After his stint in Australia, he came and set up the critical care units for Columbia Asia Hospitals. He has been the organizing secretary of GAPIO 2016, organizing secretary of Criticare 2015. He is the president, national vice president elect for Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine 2021. Secretary ICCM Bangalore chapter, past ICCM South Zone member, past accreditation secretary Indian College of Critical Care Medicine. But I also know him also as a medical philatelist, as an ardent orator. He has his own website where he takes keen interest in teaching the residents of critical care, and a lovely teacher. I have attended his many courses, and today why he's here is because he's pioneered the first PPP, government and private partnership for managing the ICUs of 11 districts in Karnataka. I welcome Dr. Rangappa.
Thank you, Gaurav. That's a very long introduction for all of us, Gaurav. I think we'll get started with the core essence.
Absolutely, sir. So I'll start with our Bhishma Pitama, sir, Colonel Ashwini Goyal, sir. Sir, things changed overnight.
No, please don't call me Bhishma Pitama. I don't feel that I'm so old.
No, sir, that's the stature.
Anyway, yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, things have changed overnight. As I was saying कि जहां डॉक्टर बोलते थे कि नहीं पेशेंट को ओपीडी में भेजो, हाथ लगाएंगे तो ही प्रिस्क्रिप्शन लिखेंगे, दूर से नहीं पता चलेगा तो गलती हो सकती है, बाद में मैं फंस जाऊंगा, से कहां एकदम से ओवरनाइट नई गाइडलाइंस आ गई और न्यू नॉर्मल हो गया. जिस तरह से कोविड का लॉकडाउन बढ़ता जा रहा है, पता नहीं आज मोदी सर क्या करेंगे, बढ़ाएंगे, खोलेंगे, क्या करेंगे, बट टेली हेल्थ इज हियर टू स्टे. So can you give us an overview on the new guidelines and what has changed in telehealth?
Yes, rightly said. See, this is the new normal. And what was the normal earlier was that the doctors were treating the patients with the live interaction, face-to-face interaction with between the doctor and the patient. We from the Telemedicine Society of India had been striving for almost now 20 years to make telemedicine or telehealth activities a part of the entire paradigm of healthcare in India. Because we all know that there is a humongous gap between the demand and supply of quality healthcare in India. The almost more than 70% of our population which requires quality healthcare resides in the rural areas, whereas 70% of the healthcare that is being imparted is available in the urban or semi-urban areas. So we at TSI have been striving for it for a very long time. It was in February that the efforts were afoot to draft and to issue these, to give a shape to the telemedicine practice guidelines. But then COVID happened. And the entire thing went topsy-turvy. सब कुछ उल्टा पुल्टा हो गया, जैसे आप कह रहे हैं कि नया normal, new normal. So the old paradigm of the practice of health has undergone a sea change. So what has happened now? The new normal is the doctors have to now provide quality healthcare under the overarching umbrella of this scenario of social distancing and lockdown. अब ये social distancing और lockdown में हम कैसे अपने patients के साथ interact करें? So here the technology, the telecommunication technology provides us with an excellent tool which is known as telemedicine. So I will not I would not strive to teach you what is telemedicine or what is telehealth, because it is, all of us are doctors here. We are, and doctors as a group of people are one of the most techno-savvy people in the world, globally speaking. So now there are three primary roles for telehealth technologies during this crisis, and how telehealth technology can provide. It is an armamentarium for the doctors to reach out to their patients in the those who are underserved and those in the outreaches. So I identify three primary roles. The first is very simple. It is to screen patients remotely rather than have them visit the practice, the offices of the doctors or the hospitals. They can be used to triage patients with cold and flu-like symptoms and to remotely care for those who don't need medical intervention or who could receive care at home. So by keeping the potentially infected individuals out of the hospitals and the doctors' offices, the healthcare system can lower the risk of transmission to other patients and healthcare staff. So that is providing a distance between those who are infected and the healthcare providers who are healthy. And the second role for telemedicine during this pandemic scenario is most often overlooked, and that is to provide the routine care for patients with chronic diseases who are at a very high risk if exposed to the virus. For example, the government has come out with guidelines that those above 60 years of age, those with diabetes, those with these are lifestyle diseases like hypertension, and especially those who are on immunosuppressants. So such kind of patients, they are at very high risk if they are exposed to the virus. So COVID-19 can be very harmful or even fatal for people with compromised health. And by using these video visits, physicians can help those patients avoid the coronavirus exposure. The third and very significant role for telemedicine or telehealth is that providers and their staff are also not immune to the infection. And in fact, they are at much more increased risk for contracting COVID-19. These who are known as corona warriors, they are at the front lines, like people like Dr. Sandeep and Dr. Ranganan. They are right at the front lines and battling with the virus, and they are the people who are most vulnerable due to the continuous exposure to the infected patients. So once tested and confirmed, if at all, God forbid, any of those turn out to be positive or contract infection, these providers will be quarantined and they will become unavailable to the healthcare system just when the entire system needs them the most. So what do we do? Now, with the telehealth technologies in place, these quarantine providers have the option to continue to see their patient via remote feeds. So in a nutshell, this is what the new normal is. And this is how the frontline corona warriors can utilize the technology which is available to us to effectively deal with the COVID pandemic. Over to you, Gaurav. You're muted. You're muted.
So, like you sir said, there are three use cases, and you explained it very nicely. But sir, how things have changed for a general practitioner, right? I know of a case of a very dear friend in Amritsar who was literally rebuked publicly that on a WhatsApp message, he said that, okay, if I'm doing a video call, I need to be paid for it, which is very normal. So questions that a general practitioner or many of our doctors who are now maybe doing 20 to 30 consults per day are asking that, how do I protect my patient? How do I protect myself? What does the telehealth new guidelines say about data privacy, about storing the prescription, the video recording? Last night I had a discussion with my friends. They said, no, if you have written what has happened during the video, you don't need to store the video. So do we need to store the video, not store the video, prescription store, not store, how much time, how to retrieve? So very specific questions and specific answers on that, sir.
Yeah, so Dr. Chokral, a very pertinent question. These are all burning issues. But then, if you look at the essence, the underlying ethos behind these issues, you will realize that this is nothing different from what a doctor is required to do in the so-called normal, or what is now being known as BC, the before Corona era. So, firstly, record. You see, you need to have your records in absolutely correct shape, and you have to record in the correct manner. All interactions that you have with the patients, you must have some kind of a mechanism whereby you can record them. If you're using a smartphone, you have the facility of sending, if a patient approaches you, then the consent is implied. See, consent and record. These are the two pillars of the entire paradigm of provisioning of healthcare under the new normal. So, if the consent is implied, even then you must ask a leading question to your patients. Or if your patient, like in this case in Amritsar, is a child, then the parents should be asked that I am going to be treating you with telehealth technology, with the help of technology. I am not going to be able to provide treatment in a face-to-face manner. Is this acceptable to you? You must record somehow a yes, or yes, I'm agreeable, something like that should be forthcoming from the other side. And this, you can always, there's so many apps, you can use it, that app, a voice recorder is there. You can always use these kind of apps to record these kind of responses. If it is an explicit consent that is required, if you are approaching a doctor, a patient, then you must have some kind of a form. If you have read, I'm sure most of us have read the telemedicine practice guidelines, which were issued by the Medical Council of India, Board of Governors, and approved by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare on the 25th of March, 2020. So they have given formats of consent. They have given formats of prescription. All those formats are available in the telemedicine practice guidelines. My society, the Telemedicine Society of India, we are conducting training sessions for doctors to train them on such issues so that they do not fall foul of the law. You are most welcome to attend these sessions. I'm sure you will come out much wiser in how to utilize the new technology that is available to you in a much better fashion, and so that basically the intent is so that the doctors are protected from just such kind of harassment which you just mentioned of this case in Amritsar. Now you talked about data privacy. See, data privacy, there is nothing different. You have to protect the data even if you were interacting with the patients face to face. The same kind of rules and regulations are applicable even now. The government was in the process of bringing out general data privacy rules. The bill came out in 2019. It was to have been made into an act that has been held in abeyance, but that is actually not under the ambit of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. It is the Ministry of IT that is concerned with that. So those are different issues, but suffice to say that the data of the patients and the privacy and security of data is a major issue. And not only is it in India, it is globally so. And you have to make all efforts to make a system. If you're using your smartphones, then you must ensure that this data does not fall into any other hands. You are very careful about the data that you stored, the information that you record in your registers or on your phones. Make a backup, keep it in a secure place so that you don't follow the law. As regards storage of data is concerned, by law you are required to store it for 10 years. But I would recommend that you store it and do not bother about 10 years or 20 years. You never know when it will come back and hit you like a whammy. Somebody can even come back after 15 years and file a lawsuit against you that so-and-so thing happened and now this is what has happened, and the doctor failed to exercise due restraint or he was negligent. And if you don't have your data secure with you, stored with you, you can get into problems because the courts do not listen to you that I destroyed my data after 10 years or I could not secure it properly. Those kind of answers are not accepted by the courts of law. So it is always prudent to store your data safely, store it. Nowadays, the data storage mechanisms are not very costly, as prohibitively costly as it was earlier. Even 1 or 2 terabytes or even a 5 terabyte hard disk costs a few thousand rupees. So it is always, I would recommend that you store your data safely, securely for an indefinite time, till such time it can be required at any time. I do hope this suffices to explain.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'll just mention 2 things here. That, sir, as necessity is the mother of invention. So in this time also, we set up helplines of teleconsultation, and our teleconsultation number itself went 5 times. And in that case, because of our robust call center, where we had these people taking the consents, storing the consents, patching a recorded line call with the doctor, even a video recording was also being recorded, and the prescription also is being stored in the system in a manner that can be retrieved on a press of a button. So that's, I think, also having providers who can give you such a structured way of doing consultation helps.
Yes, absolutely. So if a doctor, now what happened in Amritsar? You see, that doctor was interacting directly with the patient. That patient and that local politician knew where the doctor was staying. So they came to his house, they harassed him, so much so that he had to tender an apology, where he was totally in the right. He had done nothing wrong. It is mandated by law. The law permits him to ask for fees like any other doctor, and it is his right. But he was forced to retract and tender an apology. Of course, various organizations took up a case on his behalf, and the politician and the patient's guardians had to tender an apology, had to take back the case. But then, you see, this would have not have happened had what the scenario that you are explaining. You see, if there is a provider, then there is a barrier between the patient and the doctor. You are going through a structured system where all those fail-safe mechanisms are built in. You have a structure for creating a consent, taking a consent, recording the same. You have a system for recording the entire interaction. You have a system for generating a prescription, of storing a prescription, and a retrieval at any time thereafter. So this is a great service to the doctors that you're doing. And these kind of things, the doctors should go in more and more for these kind of structured mechanisms, providers who are creating an ecosystem like this.
Thank you, sir. I must tell everyone that we have reached to more than 4,000 people. We have around 80 people live on Facebook and around 55 people on Zoom as of now. I go to Dr. Rangappa now. Dr. Rangappa, we have been hearing a lot of things on medical legal liability, part of which Dr. Ashwini also picked up. But what is the medical legal liability and there was a time when people said there is a limited information available on teleconsult, right? Even in e-ICUs, how much the nurse will tell me and what would be my liability. You being a medical legal expert, sir, could you highlight that what is the medical legal liability in teleconsultation?
Yeah. Thanks, Gaurav. I think, see, this topic was heavily debated when I was going to National Law School, and this was a very hot topic then, Gaurav. And it was a nebulous area at that point of time because everyone used to be little, wary about doing this tele-ICU or tele because of the liability issue. So what would be the liability? Whether the whole liability would come to the tele people or would it vest with the people who are looking after the patient at the bedside, right? And so in this, there are quite a few confounders that play a role, as you rightly said, Gaurav, because I think the wedge that is created is really dependent on capturing all the information between the people on site and the people who is controlling remotely. So obviously with the technology, Sandeep would agree that now the technology is so robust that you are really accessible to all the information on the bedside, independent of a personal conveying that information to you. So that is how the technology has evolved to a stage where the need for a personnel to convey certain information about the patient at the ground level is significantly minimized, albeit there may be some information that you may look. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is, Gaurav, see, whenever a medical legal issue is spoken about, always there are 2-3 dimensions to it. I think the most significant reason for any medical legal issue to arise is when there is a conflict between the people that are involved in the care of the patient. And this arises from the 3 aspects. One is from the patient aspect, one is from the immediate care provider, and from the doctors that are there. So when there is a discrepancy or lack of consensus between these 3 elements, so when I say from the patient and the patient family, and from the care providers at the bedside, and from the tele remote side. So obviously when there has been lack of consensus on any of this accord, then obviously there is a possibility or there is a recipe for the conflict that will arise. So when a conflict arises, or whether the envisaged outcome that would have been aspired for is not achieved, that's when a medical legal issue will arise. Then the second question that would arise from that scenario is, who is liable? So whenever there is a conflict of this nature which arises due to the dichotomy or lack of consensus between these 3 pillars, which constitutes favorable outcome for any patient, because the lack of consensus is the first one, or the lack of accountability. So when such a situation arises, I think that is when the question arises, who is liable? So as per the legal norms, as we understand right now, so both would be equally liable. The person who is remotely, suggesting, recommending, or identifying any interventions, and the person who is executing on the bedside, so the doctor or the care personnel. So at this point of time, so the liability would vest with all the care providers who have been involved in the decision making of maybe intervention of any drug administration or anything of that sort. So the vicarious liability would still vest with all the parties involved in the care delivery of the patient, Gaurav. So with that, I don't think telemedicine, the people who are providing telemedicine can completely absolve of their responsibility at this point of time. So with that, the liability would vest, and obviously the investigation or the legal course would take its due course in ascertaining how much the remote site has been responsible in influencing the decision. So the key essence is to make sure that there is an absolute consensus in whatever plan is made to the patient with regards to the care delivered to the patient, and that should be in absolute sync with the patient's consent as well. So all these things have to be clearly documented. So obviously when there is a lack of documentation from the remote site or from the parties who is delivering the care at the bedside, then that would create a recipe for the conflict. So when all these elements are aligning in the right direction, then obviously the liability would be significantly minimized, Gaurav. So this is what I could understand from the legal parlance, because legal issues will only thrive when there is a lack of consensus between the care delivery people, Gaurav. So when there is an absolute consensus between it, then there is no issue of liability that would arise. But I think both would be equally liable, and it will be dependent as to the type of decision, and it will be dependent on the context that we are looking at, Gaurav.
Thank you, sir. What I have understood is that there is no dilution in the liability of a doctor, whether there is a care provider involved or it is a direct discussion with the patient, and hence all the precautions have to be taken, yes, as we were discussing initially. Yes. I'll jump to Dr. Diwan, sir. Dr. Diwan, you are managing already 200 eICU beds nationally and internationally, out of which 60 beds are in Nepal, Bangladesh, and New Guinea. And as you were telling me that this would now go to almost 100 more beds in 1 month, right? It's a great job, sir, you are doing by helping people who really need the help when they're not trained intensivists to handle these people. But share your experience, but also share the challenges in setting up the technology piece, the limitations, and how the teams are rapidly adapting to this environment of eICU.
See, I'll take it step by step. So we started 10 years back. You were in Fortis at that point of time. So this was 2010. I'll just tell you a small story. We had a 4-year-old baby which was operated for tetralogy of Fallot's in our Escorts Hospital in Raipur. The kid was stuck on the ventilator. The surgeon just called me up, sir, can you help? I'm just stuck with this kid. The 3G was launched at that point of time, and we just gave a tablet to the surgeon, and I had one tablet. We just changed the dose of sildenafil for that few days, and the kid was out of the ventilator after 4-5 days. So that's how our eICU journey actually started. And we got convinced that, okay, yes, this telemedicine piece can actually help doctors and patients remotely. Now, coming to the pieces of eICU, I'm sure it was a challenging 10 years. Much challenging than was last 2 months have been actually. Because as you have been discussing, a lot of questions asked to us about the legality of the service. We had to convince a lot of people that no, this works. I just remembered one thing, that if there's no law in the country, that doesn't mean it is illegal. We didn't have a law, but that doesn't mean that telemedicine was illegal till now. There's enough literature all across the world, right from 1990s, which shows that telemedicine and tele-ICU can give equally good results as equally when you are seeing a patient face to face. So why we started is because we believe that if there's no Indian data, even if there's this so-called Modico legal case, which touchwood has not happened in last 10 years, you still have a lot of international data to support that this thing works, as long as you are within the framework of the guidelines. Obviously, American guidelines were there to guide us, but now there are Indian guidelines, so we'll go by them. The piece that the most difficult was to convince the people that how can a doctor manage an ICU remotely? Obviously, it was difficult to convince the surgeons, the physicians. We had to call off few contracts because of the fact that the surgeons were not convinced or the physicians were not convinced. But finally, in the last 10 years, and people actually used to ask us, sir, when I was running Fortis, we had reached around 350 ICU beds, and people were asking, out of 1 lakh, you only have 350 ICU beds. So if you took it in business terms, it's a minuscule number, but that itself was very challenging. But thanks to now the guidelines are out and we are now going into a new era. So our tele-ICU calls have gone up significantly in last 1.5 months. And we are getting calls from private players, obviously from the government, from national, international sites. So everywhere now, this is becoming a reality. It has its disadvantages. Please don't go with the mindset that if it's tele-ICU or telemedicine, it should be cheap. The mindset still in India is that if you are giving an online platform, it should be cheaper than what is being done when you are at face-to-face. Because you have to invest in as Dr. Goel and Pradeep were telling, you have to put a lot of infra, you have to put a lot of software, you have to put a lot of gadgetry, and upon that you have a critical care consultants and nurses and who are managing the whole system in tele-ICU. So yes, it will be cheaper than running your ICU when you have a full critical care team, but it cannot be very cheap. So if you really want to go by exact guidelines, you need a data privacy, you need to store the data, you need to record everything, you need to keep maintain the analytics. So that's why it has its own complexities of the IT, but it is still easily doable now.
Right, sir. Any limitations, sir?
As of now, they are very less, but less 10 years, they have been a lot. As I told you, mindset that how can a doctor see patients and manage a patient 24/7. See, looking at tele-OPD is different because you have a slotted time. But managing a tele-ICU, you have to give a service 24/7. The command center has to function every time. You cannot have breakthroughs in the network because somebody's life and death is dependent on it. Yes, we had our learnings for the first 3 years. The challenge were how do you get the best IT network? How do you store the data? How do you streamline the round process? Because one round is not sufficient in ICU. You have to take multiple rounds. And all of those like Pradeep and those who are attending would know that sometimes you have to get 10 calls for the same patient. So it cannot happen that, 10 calls means 10 consults and 10 OPDs. It doesn't function like that. So that's why it has to have a really passionate team to do it. So the most important challenge was convincing the people, which I think has become easy now in the last 1.5 months.
Of course, sir, I have had this journey of home ICUs monitoring with you for the last 3 years now. And thanks to your monitoring, sir, during COVID times also, we were able to onboard patients who didn't want to stay in hospitals, who had to come out of the hospitals. And we had uninterrupted services for almost all our locations. Our people went out of the way through barriers, through sealed borders, through lack of public transportation. And it was a great help that the doctors were there 24/7 to listen to our nurses, nursing assistants when escalation was happening and for the monitoring. The same mindset challenge, sir, we are facing in home isolation now, where the government of Delhi has given out mandates that home isolation is a reality. The caregiver needs to be connected to somebody remotely who's a proficient in doing that. But I think despite launching a service in home isolation, which is a 17-day service, as less as 3,000 rupees for those 17 days, people still have that mindset that I am not going to the doctor, मेरे को तो COVID positive है, even if they're pre-symptomatic or mildly symptomatic, still that barriers are there. But I think this new normal will help change those barriers. So we, as Dr. Rangappa and Dr. Diwan were speaking, we reached to more than 7,000 people now. And we are into the 40th minute of the seminar. I'll go to Dr. Rangappa for two things now. Dr. Rangappa, you have done, I'll share the government initiative which you are also doing. So at Healthcare at Home also, sir, we are running a helpline with for the public of Mumbai, funded by one of the CSR projects, right? And also this week itself, we'll be running a teleconsultation helpline for the public in Bhopal, Indore and Pune also. So that's the good work which we are also trying to do. We have launched a free Corona helpline also. But I know that you are managing 11 district hospital patients for Karnataka government, which is the first in the country. What has been the experience, sir? Dr. Rangappa, you are on mute, sir. You are on mute. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah. So Gaurav, I think at the outset, I wish to thank our Honorable Government of Karnataka, because I take pride that our government has taken this very good initiative in partnering with private hospitals and private doctors to really streamline and homogenize the care across 11 district hospitals. And in fact, I think we are covering more than 20 districts with another Manipal hospital as well, which is on board. So I think this is one of the very good initiative that was taken, because at the very early on, they have identified that they need to really get acting with regards to creating robust protocols so that the care can be homogenized. I think the crux word I would use is homogenizing the care across all these district hospitals was the quintessential need of the hour, Gaurav, to reduce deaths. So in fact, we had multiple meetings at the outset where it was emphasized that I think the valuable life has to be saved in this COVID surge, and you need a good partnership so that all the training and the percolation of all these protocols could be imparted in a timely way. So that was the first step to this effect. And to this date, we have done this tele rounds for 11 district hospitals, covering close to more than 100 patients as of now, Gaurav. And we can really see there has been a significant change with regards to the way that we started off and now where we are, Gaurav. So what it has really helped us is, I think you can't really expect to have an intensivist in any of these district hospitals. Every district hospitals you can't really have, because there is shortage of intensive care specialists. And we know for sure that this COVID, once it reaches a stage where they need oxygen and ICU care, you need intensive care expertise. So there's absolutely no two ways out of it. So for that, the only way we could do it is having a partnership with us and consulting and doing a tele round with all these district hospitals. That was the first step. And the second most important thing we felt was the easiest way is to create a robust protocols and try to go through the protocols with all the doctors there in the remote side, so that the protocols will make things easy and will try to homogenize the care so that there is some sort of a uniformity in the care that is provided. So before the care, obviously there is some uniformity in able to recognize, so which are the sicker patients who need more vigilant care. So this was the second step that we incorporated, Gaurav, the protocol, dissemination of protocol and following of the protocol. So now, after having done 4 weeks in this 11 district, the first challenge we had was establishing a good rapport with the district surgeons, because so obviously there has not been a familiarity for district hospitals to partner with a private doctor group and do a round. So for that, I have to thank Dr. Trilok Chandra, who is right now on board. So because the bureaucracy helped us to wedge that sort of a non-familiarity that existed. And the first challenge was to establish absolute rapport, and they had to gain confidence in us that we are trying to help achieve better care to save lives of the patient, Gaurav. So that was the first challenge. And today I can say confidently, they've all become one of our best sort of a friends who have absolutely good rapport. And as Sandeep said, although we do rounds for 4 hours in a day, literally, for these patients, but it is a continuous. And now I see most doctors reach out to me, following up with the reports that we would have asked them to do, and following up on certain interventions that we would have asked them to do, and following up on the trends of these patients. So we have established absolutely great rapport. I think establishing that rapport with the doctors was the initial challenge. And the second, so that once we established, I think we could incorporate and impart these protocols in a very seamless way. And now I can be very confident that even without me, there is a good standard of care that could be delivered to these patients. And trust me, Gaurav, for 4 weeks, we have done tele-ICU. There's not been one death in our 11 district hospitals. We have done rounds. So which means there's something that must have happened. And I can relate to quite a few challenging cases. We have gotten them out of the danger, which has even been reported in the media. So yes, as I would completely align with Sandeep Diwan, tele-ICU makes a significant change. And what we have done is not the advanced tele-ICU what Sandeep Diwan does, because this was an emergent pandemic situations. We had to customize the available audiovisual aids, like we have been using the Zoom platform and trying to get reports on the WhatsApp. So these are the things that we have been doing to impart the care so far, and most of it has been happening with audiovisual platforms in a little at a primary level, not at an advanced level, as Sandeep Diwan would say. So this has been the journey so far. Yeah, Sandeep, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, so I think you're doing it right, Pradeep, because in the pandemic area, running a high-end e-ICU program will not be possible, because it takes weeks to just implement it. Even we have done the same in all our COVID ICUs that we are running now. There are 2 in Bangladesh, and now we have 10 districts in Madhya Pradesh, where we have taken up all the COVID ICUs, and 3 districts in Chhattisgarh. We are only working with the audiovisual platforms, because you can ramp it very fast and you can immediately start the rounds, because every day now is important. But yes, but this tele-ICU will stay beyond COVID era also. It has its benefits for other patients, which we have forgotten, at least for the last 2 months. The trauma, the stroke, and we all have, we have a huge load of all these things also. So I think this is here to stay. But yes, in the emergency, I think audiovisual piece are best. I would not recommend it for a long term, because then the data security and all those issues will start coming into play. But yes, I think that's the right way to move.
It's like a dream come true, Dr. Diwan. This is what home healthcare and telemedicine had always been propagating, that the reach of a doctor can become so many multiple times. Accessibility, affordability of care can be done beyond hospitals, beyond ICUs, just by having the right platform and the right processes in place. And it is exhilarating to see that such good things have happened. We have 2 questions, Dr. Goyal, if you could take. One of the questions is that people refrain from, you said providers are good, but people want to do WhatsApp call video only. They don't want to download apps, right? For that matter, even Zoom, which has had the maximum downloads these days, what should we do in that case is one question. And a continuation of the same is that people feel that there is a limitation to prescription, that not all drugs can be prescribed. There is a mindset problem with the doctors. So how would you respond to these 2 linked questions, sir?
Yes, very pertinent questions, Gaurav. I would take on the first one in the order you asked them. Why people would prefer WhatsApp platforms like WhatsApp and not download apps to carry out the telehealth activities. Now, you see, the thing is that at the moment, there is no standardization of these apps on the net. There are anybody and everybody who's coming out with apps. You don't know what is the veracity, what is the security that is inbuilt into the apps. So people are rather chary of downloading any apps because there are a lot of hackers. Then again, there's the question of data security and privacy. These are very valid issues. So people are rather apprehensive of downloading apps from generally, and also from places where they are not confident of the veracity of the app. So to obviate this problem, the Telemedicine Society of India is engaged in an exercise wherein we are making a repository of people who are providing telehealth and telemedicine activities and platforms in India. And we would be doing an assessment of their capabilities, and there would be an exercise of standardizing these apps. Also, you are very much aware that QAI has engaged in an exercise of which you and I are both members of that. And we are engaged in an exercise of standardizing and accreditation of telemedicine providers. So that is once this exercise is completed and we make it public, and then we would be enabled and we would be able to recommend to people that these are the apps which have been tested by us, and the QI or the Telemedicine Society of India assures you that these are the apps which can be utilized gainfully without much fear on your smartphones. Of course, ultimately, it is the app developer who actually can only certify the veracity and the efficacy of the apps. You and I cannot actually do it. We can only probably carry out an exercise, but then how the app functions on a smartphone, that is to be seen. That is a gray area, all right. But then, as I mentioned earlier, that if we provide a platform, then it becomes yours and my responsibility, as has been mentioned by Dr. Nagappa and Dr. Dewan as well. So there we have to be very clear about what we are providing to our clientele, that is the doctors. And if this kind of an exercise can be undertaken in India, because it's early days yet, it's only just about 1.5 months that these guidelines have been issued by the government of India. And at this juncture, I would also like to reiterate and remind what Dr. Dewan said earlier, that see, telemedicine was never an illegal activity in India. It was a misapprehension, and it was a much misunderstood concept amongst in the mind of people. Also, the situation was worsened by certain unfortunate pronouncements by responsible people that these are illegal activities and doctors can be taken to task if you give your opinion by phone or you indulge in telemedicine practice. But it was never an illegal activity, and now the issuance of the telemedicine practice guidelines have lended an aura of authenticity and validity to the telemedicine practice. So that is
Gaurav. Can you tell us that how can the doctors attend to the telemedicine association's tutorials which are happening? You're training more than 500 doctors. How do they connect there?
Yeah, it's not 500, it's 5 lakh doctors. That is the mandate which we have to train within the near future. And that would be for the treatment of COVID and non-COVID patients. So we are carrying out a series of training sessions on a platform called Gyanet. The flyers I would be sharing with you, and you can maybe share it with your people.
For our people,
yeah. So the Telemedicine Society of India's website is there. That is tsi.org.in. I'll put the address in the chat box, and so everybody can chip in and they can have a look at it and be much wiser about
Is there a
how
course
to
fee for
utilize
this,
it.
sir? Is there a course fee or these are free of cost?
Yes, for the first 1 month, it was all pro bono. It was almost 150 odd people who were working 24/7. We developed our guidelines, we developed our course content, and this training was being imparted free of cost. Now we started charging a very nominal fee. It is for now the next 1 month, it is 50% concession, that is 600 rupees per participant. Actual cost is 1,200 rupees because there are a whole lot of other ancillary costs which we need to.
Fair point, sir. Fair point. Fair point. We have last 2 minutes, and my last question to Dr. Rangappa before we close. Dr. Diwan, we have already crossed 9,500 people. We have reached while we were talking. Dr. Rangappa, my last question to you is that all allopathic doctors can do telemedicine. Ayush has also been allowed to do telemedicine. You are an ardent fan of rehabilitation, whether it is OP, IP, or home. What is a perspective of tele-rehabilitation? There are so many physios who are live at this time, want to listen. What about, how do they go? There's a huge mindset problem there. People can't imagine physiotherapy happening online, whereas it can be done on videos, it can be done on apps. There are apps available, exercise programs. CureFit has moved all the gyms online. So why not physiotherapy? So your perspective in last 2 minutes, sir. Sir, you're on mute.
Yeah. So I think, as you rightly said, Gaurav, I think I see a huge potential for inpatient rehabilitation in India, which has really not taken off in a big way as we would have thought it would, because the future of healthcare, as we all agree, will be OP, acute care, and IP rehab, Gaurav. So when we say IP rehab, Gaurav, it is not only physiotherapy. I think let's get that very clear. So IP rehab has multiple dimensions to it, and physiotherapy is one of them. And it includes a lot of housekeeping measures, and most of these patients would require a lot of simple measures like all the quality sort of markers, like having a good sort of a positioning, trachea care, and nutrition, and medication, ongoing medications, and multiple dimensions to it. So to that effect, they need a constant one sort of a consult from a doctor who has been following him up in some way, so that there is a seamless continuum of this care. So the rehab is physiotherapy plus all these other ancillary domains, which has to be supervised at least in some sort of a teleconsult, and make sure that all these housekeeping measures, what we say, like in ICU, we would say fast hug. So all this fast hug and the good trachea care, and making sure there is one sort of a physical examination from head to toe that happens whilst they are undergoing some sort of a rehab, and optimizing their nutritional needs, and reviewing the medicines that patients is on in a timely way, and any necessary investigations that at some point of time may have. So it is a very comprehensive care, Gaurav. So I think this concept has to move on from simple physio. You send him home for just physio and then allow him to decondition is not the way. So the care it's a continuum of the care from the hospital recovery to the wellness. And for that wellness to happen, there needs to be a comprehensive assessment on a daily basis in a telehealth or a telemedicine format, so that the wellness is reached, Gaurav. It is not only about sustaining his life, it is about taking his life from recovery to wellness, Gaurav. That is where I see there is a significant role for this telehealth to play in this armamentarium, because you can't afford to have a physician or intensivist to visit these patients on a daily basis. So telemedicine is the only way that we could achieve this, Gaurav.
Thank you, sir. There are 2-3 questions which I'll take in with paucity of time. Is telemedicine a part of clinical medicine as per laws? Should we need to register to government? Dr. Goel, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm registered with Medical Council of India, I am eligible to practice telemedicine as per the newly formulated guidelines.
Yeah. Dr. Ukal, yes. See, the telemedicine practice guidelines mention RMP, that is registered medical practitioner. So that by itself connotes that anybody who, an MBBS doctor, who is registered with the state medical register or with the national medical register under the Medical Council of India Act 1956 is authorized to practice telemedicine. Yes. Now, see, there is a rider to that. At the moment, yes, you can practice telemedicine and telehealth activities in India. However, you have to undergo training and certification by an accredited body within 3 years of issuance of these telemedicine practice guidelines. So that is where what I was mentioning earlier, that the TSI is conducting a course. However, ultimately the certificate and the course would be under the aegis of either the MCI if it persists, or the National Medical Commission, which is to come in, and then the MCI would be repealed. So that ultimately the course and the certificate for you to be authorized to practice telehealth would be issued under the aegis of MCI/NMC. At the moment, TSI is awarding a certificate which suffices for the time being, and people can practice telemedicine.
Thank you, sir. So winding up, before we have to go off air before Modi sir comes. So we reached to more than 10,000 people at any given point of time. 150 people were live with us. I just want to tell people that teleconsultations, whether it is GPs or whether it is specialists, tele-ICUs, ICUs at home, home isolation, home quarantine, all these services are being provided by Healthcare at Home in NCR, Bombay, Bangalore, Kolkata, Chandigarh. So please reach out to us. We have such a studied panel, which I thank from the bottom of my heart. Sandeep sir, dream come true, which we always wanted, right? That we should be able to reach out to more people. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, at the end, I would just like to offer a word of caution to everybody who's involved in telehealth activities in India or elsewhere, for that matter, globally speaking. You see, telemedicine at best can be an enabler for good clinical practice. It is not a total substitute for clinical practice.
Absolutely.
We must always keep it in mind.
Absolutely, sir.
Lest we forget that and fall foul of the law.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for those words of wisdom. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Gaurav.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sandeep.
Thank you. Bye, Pradeep. Thank you.
Bye, sir. Bye.